You know, if I say, who are you going to call? You know exactly what I'm going to say next. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. This is my favorite time of the year. It's Halloween. Yes, the season for scary movies, horror films, all my favorite parties, people dressing up, not Scary Farm, Universal Horror Nights, all the good stuff. And it's also a time to revisit some of your favorite horror films. I don't know that I would put Ghostbusters necessarily in the horror film category. Certainly there are some horrific moments, but it is one of those things that is genre defying, and it's like part horror, it's comedy, it's also a classic that has endured. And this documentary, Cleanin Up the Town, you have to see this doc, Cleaning Up the Town, Remembering Ghostbusters. I have the brother and sister team, director Anthony Bueno and producer Claire Bueno, here with me today on the Film Threat Podcast to talk about their amazing documentary. How are you guys doing?
Not bad. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm ecstatic because, again, Halloween season is here. And Ghostbusters is one of those movies that it's just a thing that you just revisit. You know, when lockdowns first happened, it was one of those films that, you know, when drive-ins were still open, they would show Ghostbusters. I really have to just give you so much credit for this documentary. It seemed to be years in the making. Stories, you know, and I have the DVD with the behind the scenes, but that doesn't hold a candle to what you accomplished. The stories you dug up, every aspect of the film is dissected, and stories that I've never heard before. Tell me, how did you first get started with this project, and tell me how you sort of fell into the Ghostbusters fandom?
Oh, it's a question for Anthony, that one, isn't it, really?
Well, fell into the fandom via my sister, because she was the first one to see it. She went to see it at the Flicks.
I did.
And then I soon followed.
Yeah.
And I'm younger. Let's just get that in there. And then just became obsessed with Ghostbusters. Whereas with you, it was
the first film I was allowed to go and see without parental supervision when I went to school. You know, when I was at school, kind of late teenager, and for me, it was kind of like that coming of age, rite of passage film, really. And then came home, was scared witless from the library ghost, who isn't. Thank you, Steve Johnson, for that. And it just captured our imagination, didn't it, really?
Yeah.
And then kind of years later, we'd been involved in making another behind the scenes making of documentary, and where John Landis was involved, and you kind of chose a good moment to speak to him to see if he thought Dan Aykroyd would be interested, and it kind of went from there, really, didn't it?
Yeah, it was just a chance for us to combine our skills. Claire's great in front of the camera and the interviews and things, and I'm all right kind of behind and doing the camera and hiding away, basically. And it was just that I said to Claire, should we do a documentary about Ghostbusters? And then asked John Landis about it when the moment arose, and he's like, sure, I could get you Danny. And I was like, that's it. And then started writing and chiseling out kind of an idea and getting a rough draft together. And that was 2007. And then 2008 was when we started doing the interviews. Didn't finish doing the interviews, just started to get all the interviews together. So that was kind of like the genesis, really.
Well, it's epic. I mean, everyone is in this film. I mean, and even though you didn't get to interview Bill Murray, but it feels like he's in the movie, right? There's so many stories and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think there's a kind of been a misconception that Bill Murray turned the opportunity down. He actually didn't. I spoke to him because we're members of the press, funnily enough, in the UK, and we were at a press conference, and on a couple of occasions I've sort of collared him and said, you know, Mr. Murray, will you be in our documentary? And he's, you know, and he agrees and he says yes. And if you watch the end of the film, he's actually, Anthony, you know, filmed me asking him and him saying, yes, I'll be in it. But he's elusive, and actually tying him down just never happened. But I'm really glad that you've said that, because a lot of people have said he might not be physically in it, but he feels very much a part of it.
He's there in spirit.
Yeah, his presence is there for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
the stories are incredible that you captured. I mean, stuff like you got Steve Johnson, you know, talking about making Slimer, and even like stuff that I didn't know, like that they started filming the movie and didn't really quite have the name Ghostbusters. They had different names for the movie. Tell me, what were the things that surprised you most that you learned in the process of making this documentary? Because you got, I mean, you got everybody. You know, you got the guy in the marshmallow suit who's a trained actor. Like, it's just incredible, these stories. But what were some of the stories that surprised you the most?
I think that the one that always sticks out for us was the level of skill and knowledge that went into making something like that. The
ingenuity, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we knew kind of bits about it, but it's like when you sit down and you talk with people, and like Richard Edlund and Terry Wendell are just like, you know, they were on screen at the same time and they're bouncing off each other, and then just going into the detail of what they needed to do, because they moved from ILM and set up Boss Film, and they did it with the aid of Ghostbusters and 2001 Space Odyssey. No, 2010. Yeah. And with that, they was able to kind of carry on and make what they make, but they had to kind of build the equipment. They had to kind of, you know, they have to design film stock, send that kind of spec over to Kodak make it, they send it back, and then they can create the effect they want and build the printers to do. And I'm like, hey, I wouldn't even know where to start to build a printer or to build a camera or to design film stock. So all of a sudden you realize the kind of the people you're in the room with, you know who they are because of what they've done. And all of us, that's it. It's like, and then there's some things that they do like Slimer, which is, you know, the simplest kind of form of is it visual effects?
Visual effects, yeah.
And like it's double exposure technique with Slimer basically, and that's as simple as it. But then there's all the other stuff that goes underneath it, and that was, you know, there were many things that kind of like appeared through the interviews that we wanted to kind of translate, and show really that as well that it's not a film about like one man. It's not a film about Bill Murray. It's a film about a huge array of kind of talents both in front of and behind the screen, and that was the important thing for us with the doc, is getting all of those packing as many of those stories as we can. There's still loads more. We just
and the credits thing was another big sort of surprise for us, and that some of the crew from Boss Film weren't correctly credited, if credited at all. So you know, I made it like my crusade, didn't I? And poor old Richard Edlund, I kept badgering him whenever we went to LA to get the original list. So you know, the documentary will set the record straight, because that's what we're there to do. You know, to set the record straight and to confirm stories that may be an urban myth or you know, or just correct them, isn't it really? But the credits was a big thing. It was definitely a one for me that I really felt quite passionately about, that we basically set the record straight. I mean, it was an Ernie as well. I didn't realize the extent like Ernie's sort of like, you know, that character going from what it was, which was supposed to be like in the whole film, to be cut down, and him finding out at literally the last minute. So it was like this, even things that you kind of knew about, you just get the other layer underneath it with it all. And that's what we were quite excited about when we were kind of chopping all this together. But it was really hard cutting stuff out. That was really hard.
Well, I'm hoping at some point you'll be able to release some deleted scenes or extra stuff that you weren't able to use. The thing that was remarkable to me also was, I mean, when you watch behind the scenes of movies today, we did it on a computer, and then we did it on a computer. We also did it on a computer. I mean, this was the age of like the height of practical effects, right? Yeah. I mean, you know, 70s, 80s, like the genre films in that period just had to invent a new way of doing it every time they were doing it, right? From the Marshmallow Man to like, you know, Slimer, like, and it was interesting to see you really documented the development of Slimer and the processes that were being tested and tried out for like how to make Slimer work. It's incredible to me, the amount of creativity that went into, you know, not just the writing and just also the chemistry between the cast, but like all of these, well, how are we going to do that? It's never been done. You know, it's one thing like, okay, a spaceship on a background and all right, okay, we've got that, how to do that. But what was done in Ghostbusters is just so unique. It was, everything had to just be created. So how did you work with the people at Boss Films to kind of like track down that footage? Because there's really stuff that I'm a fan of that film. I've never seen the stuff that you dug up. I mean, it's like an archaeological dig on that film. But tell me a little bit about like some of like digging up some of that stuff, collecting obviously a huge archive of media assets to then make this documentary. And it sounds like you started shooting in 2007. So this is quite a long journey. I mean, 14-year journey to get this thing out and into the world. But tell me about those assets, things that you found, and just your own impressions on these innovative, practical effects that we don't get, to see often enough in movies.
Yeah, that's very true.
Well, I mean, we have to thank 100%, Richard Edlund, John Bruno, Mark Brian Wilson,
Steve Johnson.
There's just a plethora of people that lent us their archive material to use. I mean, John Bruno, we didn't even know him, and he allowed his now wife to go with us, and we photocopied images for hours and hours and hours.
And FedEx, I think, for about 4
Yeah.
hours. Yeah, and there's like boxes of like all this kind of like, there's like storyboards and artwork, and it's like, Blimey O'Reilly, it's like great. I don't think we even made a dent, and we have loads of stuff.
And we also, we've got to thank Derek Osborne, who was our motion graphics editor. He came on board as our archive producer. He's a collector himself of Ghostbusters memorabilia, and so he gave us loads and loads of materials to work with. But I think you need to tell the Terror Dog story with Stuart Ziff.
So yeah, well, there's a few stories with that, but the one particular one. So we go and interview Stuart Ziff, who's a lovely man. He was the
creature shop supervisor.
Supervisor, and we go there, and he's got a lot of little bits and bobs like dotted around the house. And then there's the Terror Dog eye, and it's the eye that you see when the gargoyle statue kind of breaks down and the eye appears and it glows red. And he goes, let's see if we can get this working. Let's take it down to the garage. And he hadn't turned this thing on since they did that shot, if is my understanding. So he goes to his garage and he wires it all. And we recorded it all, and I think we've got it all in the credit. Yeah, it's all in the credits. Stuart say, he goes, because he turns it all on, and the eye comes up and glows, and I'm like, oh my god. It's like, I was really having a moment. And he's like, I'm more surprised than you are. And it was just still, even to this day, it was just like, to be in the presence of that kind of stuff anyway. But it's weird when you look at these kind of things, and how, it's just a part of the job. It's just the practicality of all of these things. And it's like, I'm just like, it was that was an era of innovation. That was like, since Star Wars till around about like till like Ghostbusters 2, really, that whole kind of like practical photochemical effects had that journey, and in that kind of phase that it went through, and before it all eventually transitioned into being digital. And there is something about there getting your hands dirty, and we did a few things. A few of them lent us their props, and it's all in the intro sequence, and we're shooting things at a friend of ours, and it's just that whole kind of like getting your hands dirty, figuring out how we're going to do this. And that's the fun part. I remember Thane Morris, the pyrotechnician, saying that like these days you're just expected to know, whereas back then you were given time to kind of figure it all out and how you're kind of like going to create some of these effects. And it's like, well, this is the idea, what do you think? Whereas now it's like, it's on a computer, you can do it on a computer, can't you? It's like, yeah, of course we can. It's just like, it's days of work anyway, whatever.
But also, I think hopefully as well, what the documentary highlights is that it was teamwork. They all stuck together, and there was no one-upmanship. They were all in it to make it work, because they're all passionate filmmakers, and they love, and they love their craft. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to see that era, that was so, like, as you pointed out, so innovative. And the fact that you reveal this process of, here's the problem, here's the thing that we want to get, here's the storyboard, right? Now, how do we get that? Like, actually, one of my favorites was talking about like the Marshmallow Man just getting like they burned like 17 of the 18 pounds.
Yeah.
They just melted them. And the fact that I never noticed that his tie is missing, the tie on there. I mean, I never noticed it. So I guess, it's right to like, no one's going to know, your eyes are here and there and whatever. And it's like, I'm sure that's been pointed out as like a goof or a continuity error, but I never noticed it. So,
You don't. It's what I don't think I did. It was either years and years later. It might have even been Billy himself when we were like talking to him, and he said about the time. It's like I never realised that.
Yeah,
this is a film I have seen a lot,
yeah.
and it's just like But that's the thing. You just sometimes if you're not engaged in a film, you just spot so many different either continuity errors or the things aren't working. But when you are engaged in something, especially Ghostbusters, it is a classic for a good reason. There's just things that can happen, and you just don't notice it or just don't care because you're just absorbed in the story and what's going on. And there's so much within that film that works extremely well, which I still think certainly holds a candle up to everything that they can kind of do these days. Considering the technological advances, there's stuff there that I would not swap it out for anything. That's exactly the way that I'd love to do some things.
Yeah, I'm so glad we'll never see a Ghostbusters special edition. I don't think.
Yes.
I don't think we need it.
No.
Don't
fix what's not broken.
Yeah, the charm just it just existed today. And now I'm curious. Well, first of all, I need to say to my audience listening to this or watching this, you have to check out this documentary. If you're a fan of Ghostbusters, it is like this archaeological dig into one of the greatest comedies, one of the most entertaining films of all time. See this documentary however you see it. In theaters and or on video on demand. Make sure you check this out. I need to ask you, as obviously hardcore Ghostbusters fan, a couple things. It's interesting just traveling to conventions like I do, to San Diego Comic-Con or Phoenix Comic-Con, cons all over the country. The Ghostbusters fandom still exists. I mean, you see people dressed as Ghostbusters. You see if they do a parade of cars, the Ecto-1 is always in there. Right. Or if they have cars on display, there's the 66 Batmobile. There's the Ecto-1. It's a classic.
Yeah.
Amazing to me how enduring the Ghostbusters fandom is. Like it has not gone away from that first film. And now we have Afterlife coming out. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the enduring fandom, and what do you feel about Afterlife? Because it feels to me that Afterlife, from what I've seen, directly connects to the original Ghostbusters. I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that you pick up Comic Cons, because I think, with the kind of films that we're making, they've become more in vogue because of like the Comic-Con culture, and something that kind of, I suppose, differs the Ghostbusters community as opposed to dressing up as Batman. If you're dressing up as Batman, you're Batman.
Yeah.
But if you dress up as a Ghostbuster, you can put your own name on, and it kind of individualizes it more, doesn't it, really? So you do become the Ghostbuster.
Yeah,
I think definitely.
But it's amazing that sort of like up until like just a few years ago, there wasn't, apart from like the original two films and the cartoons, people were still going out dressed. There's been many incarnations of all the comic book characters, and there's always new stuff coming out. But Ghostbusters, that was kind of it for years and years, but they were still going to Comic-Con. There was people there going dressed up. They weren't even born when those films and those cartoons were originally aired. So that's kind of like what it was always like. The thing is that people's dads are into the brother and things like that. And that was kind of a big thing with Ghostbusters too. It was like, the elder brother taking the younger brother, because Ghostbusters was his first film. Now Ghostbusters is theirs, or they'd seen the cartoon. So there's all those kind of things that have helped it along, but it's incredible the amount of love and passion that franchise has sort of like continued to sort of like generate for decades. And then we had the one like a few years ago in 2016, and now we've got Afterlife coming finally coming along. So it's really quite exciting. It's after all these years, you just sort of like think that you just put certain things and ideas to bed. You never think it's actually going to happen, especially when Harold passed away. So the fact that we're now here talking about a new Ghostbusters film coming out in just a matter of a few months now, thankfully, and
about 6 weeks, is it something like that?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, I think we're very excited because I think Jason Reitman he's earned the right. He's a director in his own right. He makes character-based films. So for me, who loves character-based films and love indie films, which obviously that's where he's kind of come from, I'm very excited. Actually, yeah. I think And you know, because he's picking up the baton from his dad, I would imagine that there's a huge amount of pride, and you know, he's carrying on the family. He's carrying the torch, isn't he, for the Reitmans?
He is indeed the right man.
He is the right man for the job.
Well, I do feel Jason Reitman coming from indie film is a huge help, because that tends to be more character driven. And I think that that's the thing that people don't appreciate about the original Ghostbusters. It would not have worked. You could have done all the same special effects and action sequences, same script, but without the chemistry, right? Those character interactions, right? I mean, and I feel that that's where Jason's work, I've just admired so many of his films. I feel like he brings that strength to it. It's like the thing that it's like, you can be surrounded by all these special effects. If you don't have this heart of the film, which is a character you can relate to, I think that, you know, it just doesn't work. But everything I've seen of Afterlife looks pretty cool. Looks really pretty cool. And it appears as if, this is not a spoiler, it's in the trailer, it appears as if Dan Aykroyd's going to be in it and play a part. That's pretty awesome. I don't know how excited you are, but
he's like a kid in a toy shop.
I'm quite excited. It was just like, you know, it's just, you know, you get to relive, even when the 2016 one came out, and you're out and about and you're seeing adverts and you're seeing the No Ghost logo and things, and it's, you know, a lot of these things, you know, the nostalgia beat is very powerful. You know, we're a certain age, and then you think back, and then all of a sudden you're 10 years old again, thinking, God, this is this is what it was like. I remember this, and all that, got that fun, and everyone getting excited. And so just to kind of like getting the opportunity to be a part of that wave again, and that it is the original ones. It isn't a reboot, remake, reimagining. It's like it's another chance to kind of sit, you know, all being well with these characters, and just experience that again in the cinema, fresh. Which it just, I think it's amazing, and he is, because he is a really good director, and he's, you know, he's grown up with it. He was on the set of Ghostbusters. He was on the set of Ghostbusters 2. So, you know, there's all of these, you know, things that harken back to it. And we interviewed him a few years ago for the second doc we want to do on Ghostbusters 2, and asked him about like doing a Ghostbusters film, and at that point he was quite no. I'm an independent man.
Yeah, he was doing Up in the Air.
He was, yeah.
I was excited. He was working with George Clooney. Say no more.
Come into that. No, never mind.
Oh God.
Well, I can't wait for it. And your documentary, the timing could not be better. This is such a great refresher and a perfect way to get into, you know, the Ghostbusters fandom that is, of course, going to be excited around Afterlife. Thank you so much for joining me on the Film Threat podcast. And
thank you very much.
And I hope you make a sequel to the doc. It's phenomenal. It really is.
Oh, thanks very much.
Well,
we're oiling the wheels as we speak.
We are.
Awesome.
Hold, you know, this space.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Take care.
Take care.